So during my last two videos, when I was going over my entire Goth and Industrial CD collection, I mentioned that I had forgotten one particular CD and that it was kind of like a big deal. As for which one it is a Life Less Lived, the Gothic box. It is a Goth compilation put out by Rhino Records. So this was kind of a big deal, at least for me. This was a box set that you could get in a big box store like Best Buy. You would see it in like the sales papers. It was kind of expensive at like $60, $80, something like that. I don't really remember at this point because this came out in 2006 towards the end of the year. Yeah, my parents got me this as a holiday gift after I asked for it, which was really cool of them. And this was kind of like a big deal for me because I was like still new to the music at the time. I didn't know a ton of bands, and this was a good way to like listen to a bunch of stuff really quickly and like get a good overview. So I'm gonna kind of like go over this, give like a mini review, show off some of the contents, and then talk a little bit more about what it meant to me. So as you can see here, it's in kind of like a fake leather corset, which kind of like can slip off. It's kind of hard to get it back on without accidentally tearing a bit, so I have to be careful with it. And you kind of like see the design here. It's kind of got like an octopus. And on the inside comes with 3 CDs and a DVD. Sorry. I'm going to be struggling showing you all of these. And it also comes on the inside with a booklet. The booklet is probably like the thing I feel like is the coolest thing about this. Well, okay, the music's the coolest thing about this, but this is the second coolest thing about this. It also came with a few other things, like there was this track listing insert. This fell on the floor of my car, it got stepped on, that's what happened to it. I guess out of all the things to be damaged though, this is the least worst. And it also came with like a little square that says, make your cell phone Gothic. So if you were around back in the 2000s, you'd remember, if you remember, there's like TV commercials where you could like text to get musical ringtones. And apparently for this, you could have texted and you could have had some of these songs as ringtones for your phone. I did not have a cell phone at the time, so I never tried. Even though I did, I think, get a cell phone later when I was in college, it was one of those like pay-as-you-go phones. I don't think being able to put a musical ringtone was a possibility for those anyway. Yeah. There was also even like a little sticker that said, for more goth, go watch MTV2's Underground. And I tried that out. It was really late at night. There wasn't any goth on there. There probably was occasionally. It was like more of a general indie alternative show, but I was kind of disappointed watching that. But digressions aside, comes with like a nice little booklet. So it's got, I'll go over the contents of the booklet so everyone knows about it. It's got a sort of essay from the producer of the box set explaining why they put together this box set. So I'm not going to read over the whole thing, but to give you like the Cliff's Notes of it, it's pretty much, it's talking about how not everyone agrees on what is goth or what isn't. And she wanted to like give out a good, like more neutral historical overview, I guess, is what I'm kind of interpreting from that, rather than necessarily what she thinks are like the most goth bands. So there's even like a few comments like not everyone will agree that this is necessarily the most essential bands, or some people might think some picks are weird or feel like certain things are excluded. But like that's kind of the goal in this. It's not supposed to be like the other goth compilations that like have necessarily all the club hits on them, though it does have quite a few like popular bands and tracks on here too. It's more of to be like a historical overview, which I believe that's what kind of Rhino Records was famous for with like these types of box sets. They had another box set like this called Left of the Dial that I'm kind of wishing I had gotten at the time, because it did have a little bit of overlap with this. It was all like post-punk, college rock, alternative rock, all from the 80s. I remember it being around the same time as this. It even like kind of like acknowledges in advance that most people are going to find the inclusion of AFI's cover of the Cure's Hanging Garden a little bit of an odd choice. She kind of explains, I do want to like throw a bone there to like younger people, kind of like get them interested in this stuff. And honestly, the track on there it's a good track. if you're familiar with AFI's more popular stuff, it doesn't sound like that. AFI used to be more like of a, I guess, melodic hardcore skate punk band way back in like the mid 90s. And the Hanging Garden cover came right at the tail end of like their hardcore period. So it's kind of like a harder cover of the Hanging Garden, but not like super hard screamy stuff. It's still recognizable as the Hanging Garden. It's also got some other written stuff. It's got an essay written by Mick Mercer as well. So if you don't know who Mick Mercer is, he's a music journalist. He's well known for writing a ton of books on Goth. He put together some other well-known Goth compilations, like the original Goth Box 1, 2, and I think 3 or whatever, that was popular in the 90s. He put that together. He put together a Goth compilation for K-Tel, if people remember them. They were this company that used to put out, like, they were like one of the original companies that got successful putting out all the like the hit songs on one CD for people who are more casual music listeners. And again, he like wrote a lot of books about it. He had his own like magazine at the time called The Mick. It was like an online magazine where he would talk about bands. I actually discovered some cool bands through there, like Dead Chovsky. So yeah, they really picked some credible sources for writing about this. So Mick Mercer kind of writes a little bit about a description of goth music, a little bit of the history, general overview, talks about how much variety there is. Because back in the 2000s, like the big deal was there is like a million different goth sounds. And like a lot of them wouldn't be considered goth sounds now, but that was like kind of the prevailing trend at the time. It's also got, from another well-known like music journalist, it's got David Thompson, who wrote, I think it's the Dark Reign of Gothic Rock. He writes little write-ups, for like all the bands on this compilation. So every single one of them gets like a nice meaty paragraph describing the band and why they're important to this compilation. So all of these tracks are being justified for their inclusion here. It's not, oh, here are some tracks, deal with it. They kind of explain it. It also has, one sec, a section on, it's called the G word, artists address the goth tag. So it's asking different artists like Peter Murphy and Daniel Ash at Bauhaus, both Miss Fiend and Nick Fiend, Andy Sex Gang, Nivek Ogre from Skinny Puppy, Robin Guthrie from Cocteau Twins. They even asked Davey Havoc, who I'm sure was probably surprised he was included on this too. So you got like a bunch of different goth musicians' thoughts on being tagged goth or what they think about goth, and that's kind of like really interesting to read as well. Like this booklet, I love this booklet. It's really is a nice addition to this. It's also got like 2 personal stories titled Hiss and Hearse. So it's like personal stories about people in the scene. Hearse is kind of like a play on words for his and hers. So it's got like one male and one female person like going over their experiences in the scene. It's also got a ton of band pictures in it. So you got like Carl McCoy, Virgin Prunes, Sean Brennan of London After Midnight, which is probably the one that like pops out the most with how much more colorful it is than a lot of these black and white 80s looking photos. So it's got like a lot of band pictures. You kind of have to like read the little key here to see who's who if you didn't already know. And like when I was like 16 and had this, actually I was 17 and had this, I did not know who was who just by looking at them. I had only heard the music. I'd never seen the people. It's also got a section called The Lighter Side of Goth. So it's got a tutorial on how to dance Gothic. So it rates moves by their difficulty and goth rating, and it's got like little picture demonstrations here. So it's kind of like a nice, cute, jokey thing. And it also has 10 essentials for running a proper goth night, which it's not as jokey. It's got some like serious advice as well. But yeah, it's written by Scary Lady Sarah. So again, they really like pulled their stops to like get people who are reputable to write for this booklet. If you don't know who Scary Lady Sarah is, she is a goth DJ, started DJing in Chicago in 1988, and is like one of the more well-known DJs, partially just for DJing so long and being so successful at it. She's also now in a band called Bellwether Syndicate with William Faith. Though back then, when this was written, apparently she was in... Sorry. Pretty sure it talks about what band she was in then. No, I must have misread that. But yeah, it talks about stuff, or Goth Night Nocturna and stuff. Yeah, sorry, that was kind of like a weird digression. And in the very end, it's kind of got like the credits for all the songs on here. And you might think, oh, that's kind of boring, but it tells you what year this came out, tells you who's playing what instruments, it tells you what album these are from, which is really helpful. Like, say, for example, I like Exterminating Angel by the Creatures, which I do. It tells you who's in it. It's Susie, Sue, and Budgie. And it says all the different instruments played. So, like, Susie Sue, lead vocal, Suicide Hoover drone, Kodo zither, toy piano. Budgie, drums, percussion, aqua marimba, synthetiques, caustic guitar, organ, singing bowls. Oh, and there's Knox Chandler guitaroscopes. And most of the entries aren't that interesting with, like, who's playing what instrument, but I kind of love that. It just made Creatures sound so much more exciting. And it says it's from the album Anima Animus. Came out in 1999. So if I wanted to hear more, I'd know what album to go look for, which is really helpful for, like, an intro box set. I know, it sounds boring to, like, look at the album credits, but you can learn a lot from it. Okay, moving on to the actual, like, music on the disc, or, like, the important part, I guess. It's divided into 3 discs. Each one sort of has its own theme. They don't explain that there's themes in the booklet, but you can kind of, like, get a feel for them when you're going through the entire box set. So disc 1 is kind of sort of your starter pack bands and your post-punky type bands. So you got Joy Division, Cure, Bauhaus, Sisters of Mercy, Susie and the Banshees, Fields of the Nephilim, Mission UK, Sisters of Mercy, all that stuff. You got Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry, all that too. It's not just the super main usual suspects, but it's got a lot of those are all on the first disc. There is a bit of weirdness with which song they chose to include for the Mission UK. So it is Wasteland. It's not the version of Wasteland from God's Own Medicine. It's from the weird Greatest Hits album that I think came out around the turn of the millennium. I think it might have been called Resurrection or just Greatest Hits. I think I've seen it called both. So it's kind of like Mission UK's Greatest Hits remixed by Wayne Hussey. So it doesn't sound anything like the originals. It's not as bad as like some of the Cleopatra Records remixes from back in the day, which were super electronic-y. Like particularly this cover of Wasteland, it's dancey, but it's kind of like natural sounding. It's not very bleepy and bloopy. It's still got like the lead guitar, it's just missing the 12 string, and it's got like a little dance beat under it. I actually really like it. So it's not necessarily a bad choice, just a weird one. And it is something to look out for, like if you're looking up like playlists for this on Spotify or whatever, people who are compiling it probably aren't going to have the right Wasteland on there. And then you're not really getting the right experience for this. Disc 2 is kind of more of the John Hughes goth, your dark waves, your ethereals, your less rocky type of stuff mostly. But again, there's also a bit of post-punky stuff too. It's got Cranes, Cocteau Twins, Dead Can Dance, Flesh for Lulu, Nick Cave, a bunch of stuff like that. It also has one of the few 90s bands on here, which is Miranda Sex Garden. So yeah, this is mostly 80s. There's like 2-3 bands that aren't from the 80s. And on disc 3, it's kind of like more the punky and industrial-y type stuff. So that's where you got your Killing Jokes, Throbbing Gristle, Skinny Puppy, Ministry. It's got London After Midnight, the other 90s goth band, and it's got the AFI cover on here as well. Got Misfits, a bunch of stuff like that. So like each disc has its own theme. Also there's kind of like some recurring like threads going throughout this. So on each disc, you have a band Ian Astbury was in. So Ian Astbury of the Cult. So he was originally in Southern Death Cult, which was like a very short-lived goth band. They put out like a single or two, and the only music we have for them is like a roughly put together compilation of everything that was recorded. He was later in the Cult, obviously, but before the Cult was the Cult, it was called Death Cult. So on disc 2 you got Death Cult, and on disc 3 you have the Cult. From before they went all like AC/DC or whatever. So it kind of like each disc like introduces you to the like development of Ian Astbury's career at the time, which is kind of interesting. Though it's worth mentioning, Southern Death Cult is a different band. Death Cult and the Cult are the same band. Death Cult is just what the Cult was called before they changed their name. A lot of Death Cult songs later became Cult songs on their first album. So that is like a little nitpicky inaccuracy when you're going through the book. It's acting like Death Cult and the Cult are totally different bands, but they're not. Same members, same band. It's also got pretty much every Bauhaus side project from back in the day except for David J's solo work. So you got Bauhaus, Tones on Tail, Love and Rockets. Did I say Dolly's Car? I forget. Dolly's Car, Peter Murphy, and Daniel Ash's solo careers. Just know David J. I kind of like but they kind of like, I guess, said, okay, we have too much Bauhaus stuff. Sorry, David J., you're not included. Also on their DVD, they've got like a bunch of music videos. It's all for bands that are already on the 3 discs. So you got Cure, Bauhaus, Sisters of Mercy again, some other popular songs by the bands. Also a few stuff by other bands too. Like it's got Jesus and Mary Chain, which was kind of funny at the time because the other CD I got from my parents in addition to this was Jesus and Mary Chain's Automatic album. And it was one of those like dual-sided CDs they used to have in the mid-2000s where it would either like have music videos or a surround sound mix or something like that. And in this case it had music videos. So actually both CDs I had came with the music video for Jesus and Mary Chain's Head On. But yeah, overall, I really like the variety that's on here. No, not all of it's like strictly goth. It's more, but it gives you kind of like an overview about what people who listened to goth in the 80s might have also been listening to. And although they are themed, there is going to be like still some like goth stuff scattered throughout the 3 ones. And again, disc 3 also has death rock. I know I said punk, I didn't specify death rock, but it's got death rock on here too. So it's got 45 Grave, Community, FK, and Christian Death. So it's got a little bit of that too. I feel like that's important to mention in case people are curious. So yeah, it was a good overview for me. That's kind of like why I fondly remember this one. So pretty much what I did not listen to the CDs much instead, because I wanted to just like listen to all of it. So back in the day, we used to have MP3 players. I mean, we still do, but there were like 2 types of MP3 players. You had like the big ones that held a ton of songs and had the screen and you could make playlists and scroll through everything. And you had the really little ones that if you were lucky, they had some sort of screen. And mostly you just played those on shuffle. So I had one of those. I deleted all my other music off of it. And I just put this box set on it. I listened to it on shuffle. And I just like left it on that little MP3 player for like months. And whenever I would like go on car rides, riding the school bus, I would listen to it. So I got to really take in all of this stuff and really get a feel for it. So like pretty much the first quarter of what year was it? 2007. Sorry, my mind's kind of going. Yeah, so like the first quarter of 2007, this was just the soundtrack to that. And like it really did like kind of like expand my horizons a lot with like again, how varied this music was even compared to like goth in general in the 80s. So like you could pick up like Susie and the Banshees, like not greatest hits, this is a singles collection. And I would get a lot of variety. I'd pick up Bauhaus, same thing. But it paled in comparison to like the amount of different sounds on this. Kind of really showed like how creative people back in the 80s, goth bands, goth adjacent bands could get. And that like kind of really inspired me to want to make music like this. And like when I was first got my guitar, which was shortly after this, one of the things I wanted to do was like get all the sounds for this. And I was like, oh, I got to get this pedal and that pedal and that pedal to like get this sound. Of course, I didn't have any money, so that was a little disappointing. Anyway, yeah, so I feel like this was definitely a big deal to me. I'm kind of curious, though, whether it was a big deal for other people, too. I'd imagine with how available it was, probably quite a few people got it, but I'm not sure. I don't really hear a ton of people talking about it. So I'm kind of gonna like ask the viewers here, what do you think about this box set? Have you listened to it? Did you get it back in the day? Do you agree with like the track listing? Do you feel like it's like a good introduction to Goth, or do you feel like it's a little too quirky or off base to be a good intro? Love to hear people's comments on it. You can leave a comment if you like. If you enjoyed the video, you can like it. If you dislike the video, you can dislike it. I'm fine with either one. You can also not do either. I'm not the boss of you. You can find me also on Facebook and Instagram as illustration links. I admittedly don't update those that often, but I might post updates on there again soon. So if you're looking for any way to do that or for contact, you can do that. And I hope everyone has a good rest of their day. I will see everyone in the next video I make. Bye.